I was back in the dim lobby. I dropped my arms. The anger from Jared seemed to cling to me like cigarette smoke. It seemed so real. I brought my hands up to protect my face from the giant dog. Had I cried out? No one had come to see what was the matter if I had. Of course they had not. Why would they? Hallucinations were never a good sign. The pen swung against the side of the counter, the chain making soft scraping sounds that seemed too loud compared to the now muffled sounds of the lobby. Maybe it was too late. Maybe I'm already dead, and this was purgatory. That theory would make more sense if I had ever been Catholic. In the evangelical branch I grew up in, only heaven and hell were allowed, and most people were going to hell. I just wanted to get to my room. I could hear the faint dings and creaks of an old elevator as it ran between floors, but it couldn't have been coming from the one in the lobby. It sat dark and empty, old-fashioned accordion gate open, car still and foreboding. I didn't see another. Maybe there was one for the employees that was still working. It was clear this one was not going anywhere. Of course, my room was on the second floor. I'd have to climb the wide stairs that dominated the center of the lobby, like something out of an old movie. I could picture Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard, slinking down the carpeted steps, rasping her famous line. I may not be ready for my close-up, but I am ready for a nap, I said to no one. I was too tired to climb after the long walk. I also didn't feel like waiting around in this weird half-dark lobby either. The stairs vanished into darkness before the first landing, so I had to walk slowly, keeping my hand on the rail to make sure I didn't trip and wind up back in the lobby. I really hoped I would not find a spider or some other unsavory creature in the dark. My hand brushed against something soft, and I had just enough time to register that it was a scarf or some other cloth before the static returned, and the electric shock caused me to fall to my knees on the carpeted steps. I was back in the afternoon lit room of Jared and Jennifer. Jared slammed the door as he left the room, and Jennifer let her head hang forward. This was not turning out the way she'd planned. All her girlfriends were talking about the exotic vacations their husbands were taking them on. Beaches in ancient cities or exotic locales with names they couldn't even pronounce. And while on these trips, they found new light and fire in their relationships. They came home happy and glowing with sun and renewed passions. 2 were even pregnant now. That was what Jennifer wanted. What they all had. Husband, children, a large house, and amazing vacations. All she had was Jared. And a little apartment in a big complex where all the buildings looked the same and all your neighbors did too. One time, last year, after a night out drinking with friends, she tried to open the door to the wrong apartment. In her drunken state, she had gotten confused as to which building was which. She had not realized her mistake until after the 3rd try of failing to get her key in the lock, and the man had come out threatening to call the cops. It had been really embarrassing. But it had been even worse when Jared had yelled at her for being stupid. He always yelled at her for being stupid. He yelled about a lot of things. The room she was in was nice, but slightly worn. The doors to the other rooms on this floor had been nicer, more polished, nicer trim. She imagined that the rooms on the other side of her were nicer. She wondered if they had newer carpets, or maybe a painting above the bed that was brighter than the faded watercolor rose she was staring at. Sulking, she pulled a magazine out of her bag and sat by the window. She idly flipped through the pages, wishing she could be more like the women on the glossy pages. Thinner, prettier, more glamorous. Then Jared would love her more. Jennifer heard a couple out in the hall. They sounded happy. She wanted to be happy like that. She sat there staring out the window, imagining that the couple in the hall's lives must be like. She bet they drove one of the fancy cars she'd seen down in the parking lot. Long and sleek town cars with tinted windows and individual temperature control and heated leather seats. She wondered if they had a big house, and if he worked in the city while she spent her days shopping in the best stores and eating in the best restaurants with her beautiful friends. She wanted to be that woman so badly it hurt. While she stared out the window, dreaming of all the things she did not have, night had fallen. Or maybe a storm was moving in. The warm afternoon sun had vanished behind gray clouds. Jared had not returned from the dining room yet. Surely he should be back by now. Jared ate like someone was going to steal his food if he didn't get it in his mouth fast enough. It's not like him to linger over a meal. Concerned, she grabbed her favorite green shawl from the back of the chair and headed out of her room. The hallway was not lit, and she stumbled her way to the stairs. They were on the 3rd floor, so she hoped the lower floors were better lit. Had the power gone out? She did not meet a single other person on the stairs down, but she could hear them still talking and laughing in their rooms. No one else seemed to be worried about the storm coming. Maybe she was just being silly. Maybe everything was just fine and Jared had just lost track of time. He would be mad at her for worrying and getting upset. She almost turned around to go back to her room, but a sudden whiff of something foul stopped her in her tracks. She was almost to the lobby, but everything was far from right. Instead of smelling the food from the dining room, she smelled rotting meat and moldering wallpaper. Then she heard them. Dogs barking. There were dogs in the hotel. 2 large black dogs with eyes like coals were there at the bottom of the stairs waiting for her. They barked once. I quickly dropped the shawl, skin crawling with fear. This place was getting even stranger. Briefly, I felt the stab of envy the woman in the hallucinations felt when I looked around at my surroundings again. What were these hallucinations? I began to wonder if there was a gas leak or radon poisoning or carbon monoxide. I sniffed the air to see if I could smell gas and wondered if you could smell radon. The only things I smelled were the mildew and the dead animal smell. I would have to mention that to the manager too when I saw him. I struggled back to my feet, looking around the lobby again. Still not another soul in sight. I desperately tried to ignore the chill I felt on the back of my neck as I started back up the poorly lit stairs. Don't think of the dogs. Don't think of the dogs, I told myself over and over. Naturally, I could think of almost nothing but the dogs. The huge beasts had barreled up the stairs so fast. Jennifer never had a chance. I stumbled when my foot failed to find another step. I'd made it to the top. I looked around. The hall was no better lit than the stairs or lobby. I was beginning to wonder what the owners might be trying to hide. The only thing I could hope for now was that my room would be nicer than the rest of this dump. The 4-star experience at a 2-star price promised on the brochure was a blatant lie. Of course, I already knew that was going to be the case. Since when did I ever get that lucky? My room was at the end of the hall, next to the single window, looking out over the woods surrounding the lake. I could hear the old wooden floor squeaking under the carpet pad as I looked out. During the day, it was probably a lovely view, but here at night, it was creepy, like Halloween creepy. The moon is full and the trees were shivering black blobs out there in the dark. It did give me just enough extra light to get the little worn brass key into the scratched lock. One last glance outside showed the trees swaying violently as their leaves were cruelly tugged by the now frantic wind. I was almost certain there was no storm forecast for tonight. Figured it would rain all week and I'd be cooped up in a little moldy room with nothing to do. Just my luck. The feeling of lethargy and hopelessness tried to drag me down. My therapist said I needed to learn to get a handle on the negative spiral of thoughts. But here in the middle of nowhere, no one around, no car, no dinner, and tired to the bone, it was going to be hard. My hand searched for a light switch near the door, but found nothing but slightly peeling wallpaper. I dropped my bags heavily onto the carpet. Of course. The room itself was small but neat. A tiny table with 2 chairs was set up near the window. It held a small brass lamp, whose shade pressed the sheer window covering against the glass. Condensation had formed on the glass, and small drops ran down the surface to soak into the transparent fabric. Where was the moisture coming from? was easily 85 degrees outside and not much cooler in the room. Why was the window damp like it was cold? I reached behind the filmy curtain and ran my finger through the condensation. The glass was cold under my fingers, and I could hear the whistle of wind along the eaves of the building. For a brief moment, I thought I saw bare trees huddled for winter out by the lake. I blinked. They were full again. I was about to turn back to the little room, maybe take a shower, when something caught my eye. Down in the little parking lot near the trees, there was a spot where the shadows lay deeper and the trees looked more ominous and forbidding. From the window, it looked like dogs, but they were too big and moved in a curious way, like puppets guided by a child. The limbs seemed to move out of sync with the heads, and they jerked too sharply. Were there wolves here? Were they rabid? I did not want to think about dogs anymore, especially giant black ones. I reached for the lamp, but the moment my fingers brushed the brass, I knew it had been a mistake. The prickling in my fingertips was just enough warning that I didn't hit my head on the table as the world gave a sickening tilt and the light changed again.